Hey class. So this is the still class one of the week of March 30th. This is the second video that I'm posting for first class of the week. The other video is about the theory application paper, and I did a screen sharing thing where I showed you the documents that I posted on eCampus and sort of walked you through those. I like the screen sharing. I think it'll work well here. As you can see the screen, I'm looking at the full text of no exit, and I'd ask you to look along with me. It's linked on our eCampus page. But what I thought I'd do is, this is our last class that we'll be talking about and looking at no exit. And I want to make this shorter. I know that the theory application paper video went on a bit, so this is going to be shorter than that one, certainly, and shorter than the first video I posted on no exit. In fact, I'm going to, what you're going to be tasked with doing after this is another mini quiz, but this is going to be a mini quiz. With our other mini quizzes, there were 3 questions, and you choose 2 to answer. The one that you're going to answer after you're done watching and listening to this video is you're only going to be required to answer 1 question. I'm not sure yet whether it'll be 2 or 3 to choose from, but you'll only have to answer 1, and it'll count for 25 points. So this will all add up in terms of your quiz average. Your quiz average will stay the same in terms of the weighting toward your overall grade, but this will be a smaller one because I didn't want to overburden you with another long video. So what I'd like to do is just focus more on the final few pages of the play to see how this all ends. And what I think you see in the handful of pages that I'm sort of skipping over here is Inez, Garson, Estelle. We establish, or they establish for us rather, that yes, they are in fact sinners. We get more information on what exactly that they did to earn themselves the spot in hell. Estelle, for instance, is a baby killer. Inez murdered 2 people. Garcin was a horrible husband. He was also a pacifist. We'll go more into that in a little bit. We also get some interesting details. In the first video on No Exit, I talked about the way in which a playwright establishes the rules of the world, of the universe in which we are invited into. One of the things that we established last class, for instance, was that the souls in hell, in Sartre's version of hell, they cannot close their eyes. They cannot sleep. The lights are always on. As Garson calls it, it's life without a break. Another of the interesting rules that are established in the second part of the reading for today is that each of these 3 can look into their former life and observe what's going on. I believe it's Estelle who observes her funeral, rather Garcin observes his funeral. And interestingly too, the speed at which these events play out before them as they watch them go by is much different, much faster than they're experiencing it. So everything's slowed down for them, which is part of the torture they're enduring, the psychological torture. But I referenced this in the first video, and this to me is one of the really key moments in the entire play. And this is where we'll pick up. If your screen looks like mine when you open this PDF, you see at the top here, it's page 24. This is what I think the play has been leading toward, that Garcin, Estelle, and Inez are essentially each other's torturers, as Inez established. And it's leading to this point where they get to a breaking point. And Garcin here sort of loses it. He says, "Open the door, open, blast you all under anything, your red-hot tongues and molten lead, your racks and pins and garrots." Remember that this was his expectation when he was first shown into the room by the valet. "All your fiendish gadgets, everything that burns and flays and tears, I'll put up with any torture you impose. Anything would be better than this agony of mine, this creeping pain that gnaws and fumbles and caresses one and never hurts quite enough." He grips the doorknob and rattles it. "Now will you open?" Then look at the stage direction here. The door flies open with a jerk, and he just avoids falling. And then there's a long silence, and they sort of are struck here. They don't know what to do. Inez says, "Well, Garcin, you're free to go." And Garcin says meditatively, "Now I wonder why that door opened." And this is telling that all of them stand there and just look at it, and then nobody moves. So they've been partly tortured by the idea that they cannot escape, right? No exit, huis clos. And this is all going on behind closed doors, but now they have an opportunity to leave. And what do? They don't leave. Now, this is many scholars read this play as Sartre's they look at it as sort of an allegorical view of the world and of human experience and of specifically of free will. And I'm going to link to another document that I have here. I'll make sure that this is on our eCampus page as well for you to check out yourself. But this is a useful guide to understanding some philosophical concepts, and specifically we're talking about existentialism here. Sartre was a proponent of existentialism, one of the foremost existentialist philosophers. And I had you all write a writing journal on this idea of, whenever in our time the word existential is posed, it's usually like with the word threat after it. And so a lot of people think existential has a negative connotation. But in terms of philosophy, this is useful to use as a context for the play. Existentialism is marked by a set of themes about the human condition and the struggles and freedoms humans must endure or perhaps embrace. And here are a few basic sort of landmarks, if you will, about what existentialism is really all about. Number one, thinking beings, especially humans, have free will. Humans are responsible for the consequences of their decisions. Extremely few, if any, decisions are void of negative consequence. Each person acts and decides as an individual and is accountable as such. And the most pessimistic part of all this is that the world is indifferent toward humanity. But the number 5 here sort of makes 1, 2, 3, and 4 possible. The fact that the world is indifferent, that there is no inherent meaning in the world, allows human beings to act of their own will. Now, if we take these ideas, we apply them here, then this is when the door flies open and none of them move. They have an opportunity to leave the room. They've been railing against this idea that they're imprisoned, and yet no one moves. And I think this is for those who claim that this is, not actually Sartre's vision of hell. This is not actually what happens to you when you die and you've sinned incredibly, as these 3 have, but rather this is kind of a representative of how human beings go through life, that we all complain about our condition. We complain about our circumstances. I wish I could do this, or if only. But, really, by and large, we can, make change. We can affect change, and yet we choose not to. We try to convince ourselves that it's out of our hands. But I think Sartre would argue, as an existentialist philosopher, that we can do something to better our lives. Now, these 3 have no choice. Estella, Inez, and Garcin, the part of the tragedy that they're enduring, and it's questionable how much pity we might have for them, but part of the tragedy that we observe in this play is that they're beyond help. I always sort of balk when students said, well, they're trying to work toward their salvation. And they're kind of past that point right now. They're not. Salvation was maybe available to them while they were still living, but they're in hell now, and there's no chance of changing that. So when those who say that this is part of a, kind of a broader allegorical look at the world and the universe and how human beings fit into that picture, I think this is the key moment that they won't leave. Now, part of it you could say is, well, what they see in front of them maybe is tame compared to what might be outside that door. But again, I think the real significance here is how we compare it to when we live throughout our lives. We don't want to take accountability for our actions, and we choose to just blame. It's easier to blame our problems on unforeseen circumstances or things beyond our control. So that, to me, is a really sort of major moment here. I think this further, now is the second point I'd like to make. This further connects to a thread that we've been following throughout our plays so far. This is the 4th play. We're going to start Doubt for our 2nd class this week. That's going to be our 5th play. Something that we've noticed, particularly in our major characters, is how our protagonist or one of our major characters in each work that we've looked at has some sort of major flaw or major sort of element of their character, their personality that makes them extremely vulnerable to external pressures. And specifically, what I'm talking about is, let's say, Antigone. Antigone is put in a very precarious moment very, very early in her life. She's just a young teenage woman. And her parentage and who her brothers are put her in this very impossible situation. And the only way she's able to extricate herself from this situation is through death because of her principles. So she is put in exactly the sort of place, exactly the kind of situation by fate, by the gods, that she is not equipped to handle. Anything that would take away her capacity for exercising her ideals, for her principles, anything that would go against her belief and her love and family would be the thing that she's least equipped to handle. And that's exactly what we see her doing in this play. She cannot withstand the order that Creon gives, and therefore she dies because of it. What is Macbeth's major flaw, his major sort of element of his personality that he is least equipped to handle? Well, most people fall back on the idea of ambition, as I think a lot of us experienced when we went through the essay, the out-of-class essay that you took, where I had you read one of the scholarly essays. The thing that Macbeth really struggles with is his imagination. He has this immensely vivid imagination that if a possibility is presented to him, he has to go through all the different permutations in his head, and he can't stop doing it until he's sort of mapped out what his future, what kind of future is available to him. And then what proceeds from that is his guilt. In Trifles, we never meet Mrs. Wright, but we imagine that the thing she's least equipped to handle is the abuse that she suffers. The fact that she was a carefree young woman who enjoyed singing, who enjoyed some of the simpler pleasures in life, and she was beset by a situation that was exactly the thing she was least equipped to handle: an abusive, isolating husband. Now, in this play, we remember that Inez argues to the other two, once she's got a better idea of what's going on, that they will act as the torturers of the other two. Each of them were put in this room not by accident, but because of the things that they themselves are least equipped to handle. So what are these things that they are least equipped to handle? Well, let's look at it. So let's start with Garson. The one thing that Garson is least equipped to handle is being called a coward. People doubting his manliness or his masculinity. We remember that, what effect that had on Macbeth too, right? So Garson, this is now toward the top of page 25. He says he realizes that the one thing he would try to do is to convince Inez that he's not a coward. He says to her, "So it's you whom I have to convince. You are of my kind. Did you suppose I meant to go? No, I couldn't leave you here gloating over my defeat with all those thoughts about me running in your head." So for Garson, the thing that he cannot withstand is being called a coward, for having people doubt him. This connects back to his earthly life. He claimed to be a pacifist. This was during the war, World War II. And instead, what happened to him was what he did was he fled. He was a deserter. And he was executed because of his cowardice. And so that carries over into the afterlife as well for him. So he claims that he doesn't leave the room. Sorry about that. He claims that he doesn't leave the room because he has to convince Inez that he's not a coward. Now, what about Estelle? Estelle, by all accounts, by what Garson and Inez describe her, as a beautiful woman. And apparently, the one thing she cannot withstand is people paying attention to her, specifically men paying attention to her. So after Garson and Inez have this sort of one-on-one battle here, battle of wills, Estelle says to him, "Revenge yourself. Kiss me, darling, then you'll hear her squeal." So her way of sort of, manipulating Garson to defeat Inez in her mind is to make sure that Garson's attention is on her and her only. Don't listen to her, Estelle says. Press your lips to my mouth. I'm yours, I'm yours, yours. So there is this sort of battle of wills going on. Both Garson and Inez want Estelle for themselves, but Estelle needs the attention from both of them. And then finally, Inez, the one thing Inez is not equipped to deal with or to handle is she's unable to deal with insincerity or hypocrisy. She is sort of the one that keeps taking away the illusions that all of them, all three of them, herself included, hold on to, the things that they refuse to face up to. This goes back to Sartre's philosophy on accountability as connected to existentialism. So, for instance, here, Inez this is her mode throughout the play, calling people out. Well, what are you waiting for? Do as you're told. What a lovely scene. Coward Garson holding baby killer Estelle in his manly arms. Will coward Garson kiss the lady, or won't he? So her thing is she can't not needle. She can't not challenge specifically Garson and claim that he's got to try to convince her, but she's incapable of being convinced. So when they say early in the play that they will act as the torturer of the other two, it's correct. It's accurate, because they were put in this room because of their personalities, because of the things that they because of how their personality is composed, in the same way that Macbeth's his ambition, his imagination, his need for masculinity, for approval, in the same way of Antigone needing to be able to exercise her free will to pursue her ideals. These three characters are put in a situation that they are least equipped to handle. And so if we're looking for an opportunity here to call this tragic, one of the foundations that we've been tracing throughout this course is when it seems as if the cosmic forces are aligned against you, and all you can do is sort of futilely fight against those cosmic forces, but without a chance of victory. This comes back to one of the other, I think it was a discussion board posting I had to do in week 1, was about the Sisyphean experience, the Sisyphean task. This is also a foundational concept of existentialism and absurdism, is the character Sisyphus in Greek mythology, who is punished by being forced to roll a huge, heavy boulder up a mountain. And by the time he reaches the top of the mountain with the boulder at the end of the day, he has to watch the boulder roll back down the mountain. And so the next morning, he begins the same exact task. So for anyone who has ever worked a 9-to-5 job that seems pointless, that seems like it's never going to progress, or there's no chance of promotion or anything changes, and you have to sit in traffic on your way there, and there's just no opportunity for any sort of positive change. That's the Sisyphean experience. That's the model, the archetype for the Sisyphean experience from Greek mythology. And I think we see this here, characters who are put in a situation that is inescapable, maybe not physically because they have the chance to walk out the door, but psychologically, the thing that strikes them to their core is the thing that keeps them there. And this is part of the tragic experience, not just of these three characters, but of all people. Now, this leads me to my final point here, and I'm trying to keep track of the time to make this shorter for you. And as I said, the mini quiz will be a mini quiz. You'll only be asked to answer one question. I want to just look at how this plays out to the final scene of the play. Garson, once they realize that they're never going to extricate themselves psychologically from this web that they're entangled with each other, Garson says, "Will night never come?" He knows the answer to this already, but Inez states the obvious: never. Garson, "Will you always see me?" Inez, "Always." Garson moves away from Estelle and takes some steps across the room. He goes to the bronze ornament. Now, one of the first things I mentioned in the first video on No Exit was the significance of the title, the significance of not leaving, being able to leave the room. Now, this connects to probably the most famous line from this play, which we get here from Garson. "So this is hell. I'd never have believed it. You remember all we were told about the torture chambers, the fire and brimstone, the burning marl. Old wives' tales. There's no need for red hot pokers. Hell is other people." So if this is allegorical, if this is just the way in which Sartre imagines the human experience throughout life, even though existentialism is, in essence, a positive outlook. Yes, the world is meaningless. Yes, the world, if anything, is oppositional or antagonistic toward human progression. Humans do have free will. They can create their own meaning. They can take accountability for their actions. Here is the most cynical underbelly, though, of that principle, that in doing so, in attempting to create meaning and attempting to hold oneself accountable, the greatest antagonism that exists is other people trying to do the exact same thing, other people trying to create their own best possible outcome, their own best possible scenario. By nature, human beings are intended to be, kind of in conflict with one another. So if there is a cynical underbelly to existentialism, it lies in this very famous line: "Hell is other people." Here again, that we get a reminder of the rules of this place. There's a letter opener, the paper knife, as they call it. Not something that people really use much anymore, but it was, it's a sharp object that people would use to open an envelope. Estelle tries rushing at Inez and tries stabbing her several times, but as we are reminded here, Inez laughs and tells her, "You quite well know I'm dead." And they can't help but sort of laugh at the irony of it, or the sort of absurdity of their situation. And we get one final, before the play ends, one final ironic comment. If you remember, in the first part of the play, we noted that Garson says, "We haven't yet begun to suffer." He tells Inez before Estelle enters the room, "We haven't yet begun to suffer," when in fact, of course, they are suffering. Just simply being in this room, they are suffering. Here, the play ends with a similar sort of irony. Garson looks at the two women, joins in the laughter forever and ever and ever. They slump on their respective sofas, a long silence. Their laughter dies away, and they gaze at each other. Well, let's get on with it. And the curtain means that the play's over. Let's get on with it means, all right, let's get going, let's start. And the play ends right there. In other words, well, if we're going to suffer, if we're going to torture each other for the rest of our lives, then let's begin now. The irony there being that this has been going on for the entirety of this play. However long it took to act this play upon a stage, that's how long these characters have been going at each other and creating this essential torture chamber, as they call it. So the fact that the play ends with a line stating that the play is about to begin, or the action is about to begin, is itself ironic. But that is the vision that Sartre gives us for this play. That is the vision of the afterlife. Who's to say that he's not right? Who's to say that hell is not a small, uncomfortable room with people placed in there that get on your nerves and strike all the wrong chords inside you that make it seem like itself a torture chamber. And again, I can't help but sorry to end this on on a negative note based on what's going on around us, and on I'm recording this in the morning of March 28th, but we are all stuck inside. We're all maybe dealing with this hell as other people right now. In a lot of ways, this is the perfect play to capture the moment that we're all in. Being that there's a door that we're all behind, and we can go outside, but it's a health hazard at the moment. We can't. We have to be careful, and we're being asked to stay home, and that is the best thing to do. But sort of that extra layer of irony, I suppose, the real world context for us reading this play at this moment is hard to ignore. But that's it for now. That's our final look at No Exit. So what you'll do after this is go back to eCampus and open the mini quiz that's posted there. There will only be one question that you're required to answer, and I haven't yet decided whether there'll be 2 or 3. You'll see when you open it. But good luck with that, and we will get started with Doubt for Class 2. So you'll be logging back into YouTube and watching a video there. But for No Exit, we are done, and I'm signing off.